and welcome to World Talks. My name is Diana Skaya. A high-stakes meeting in London aimed at jump-starting peace talks for Ukraine was suddenly downgraded after U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio pulled out, officially due to logistical issues. But behind the scenes, sources say Washington simply didn't see the talks as decisive. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is floating a peace plan of his own, raising eyebrows across Europe. Now, with mixed signals from the United States, growing doubts about who's actually leading the peace talks, and Putin still at the table, the question is, can Europe step up? Or are we stuck watching from the sidelines? Now, to break it down, joining us in studio, I'm joined by Piotr Maciej Kaczyński, EU expert and former political advisor in the European Parliament. Piotr, so happy to have you here on World Talks.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start first and foremost with London. Now, Marco Rubio cancels his attendance. Suddenly, the talks are downgraded. What is this? What kind of message is Washington sending us here on their attitude towards peace negotiations? Is this a shift in strategy? Is it just a diplomatic reshuffling? What can you tell us?
It's very nice to talk about peace negotiations as if we had one. There's no peace negotiations. There's a war going on, Russia invading Ukraine, full stop. There's no a table like we are sitting here on the table where Russians and Ukrainians would sit together and somebody would be brokering a peace. Donald Trump wanted one. He did a lot to differentiate himself from Ukraine as US president and look pro-Russian from where we stand, but that failed. We have to admit this mission has failed, and now, right now, when American diplomats are saying, "Oh, we have to, we will walk away," this effectively what Rubio said, that simply is admitting to the mistake, to the failure of the U.S. administration to procure the peace that they promised without any solid tools to have in their hands.
Piotr, I'd like to invite you for a moment to take to listen to what Donald Trump had to say.
The best we can, working with Ukraine, we'll do the best we can. But they lost a lot of territory. When you say Crimea, that was handed over during a president named Barack Hussein Obama. That had nothing to do with me, Crimea. That was 11 years ago with Obama, and they made a decision. There wasn't a bullet fired. There was no fighting. There was no anything. They just handed it over. Now they say, well, can you get it back? I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. That was given by Barack Obama when he was president, not by Donald Trump.
All right, Piotr, I mean, you just heard Donald Trump say it. I mean, we also know that Norwegian Prime Minister had talks in Washington. What is your comment on what you just heard?
First of all, we have a misinterpretation in Europe of Donald Trump's words. He did not say that Ukraine has to give up Crimea. He said it would be very difficult for Ukraine to claim back Crimea. It's not the same thing. There is a difference here. And a lot of publicists are saying Trump wants Ukraine to give up on Crimea. And Zelensky responded, we are not giving up on Crimea. So that's effectively stating a fact. Now, the question here is Donald Trump let's say, an observer who just watches the situation and says, oh, it will be difficult for Mr. Zelensky or Ukraine to claim back its territory, or it's a US president who can effectively assist Ukrainians in the process. And the latter is gone.
A media report out on Thursday said the White House was considering relaunching Nord Stream 2, something Europe is firmly against. What's your take on that?
Look, the European diplomats are surprised over and over and over again, because it is as Americans are not working according to any plan, that they are testing ideas. They are testing ideas, oh, let's see what will be the reaction of the Russians, of the Ukrainians, of the Europeans. Will they be united or not?
When does this testing stop?
Exactly. I think it will stop in 2028 when President Trump is no longer president, because this testing was also with tariffs. The tariff war started, well, a couple weeks ago, and then 2 days later, he reduces or suspends some of the tariffs for 90 days, creating a space for some kind of negotiation. That's his tactics: create chaos, and something new will emerge from the chaos. But Mr. Trump doesn't really know what will emerge from this chaos, and we don't know either.
Piotr, if the U.S. does start officially completely pulling back, who in Europe could actually step up and be the one to talk to Russia? As difficult as this question or strange as this question might seem.
That's looking with a candle of a savior to this conflict and to the war. Look, it's so dramatically difficult out there because there's so few people who can claim to have any leverage on Vladimir Putin and bring him and the Russians to the table. Look, over Easter, we've seen what happened. Russian president says there will be truce, there won't be any fighting, and there are new attacks on Kiev, people killed, massacred. So this is what troubles Mr. Trump for sure. That there's a huge disconnect between what Putin says and what Putin does. The only person that I can think of today to have any leverage over Vladimir Putin is in Beijing. And the interesting dynamics that is new and it's starting is this new charm offensive of the Chinese vis-a-vis the Europeans, for example, to talk about what's going on in trade situation with the US, and maybe it will take us a certain distance. European diplomats over the years have been trying to reach out to the Chinese to talk about a number of issues. And on a number of times, the Chinese have been saying, no, no, no. Now it is expected that the Chinese will lift some of the anti-European sanctions that they have imposed a couple of years ago. So let's see where this new opening takes us, this rapprochement between China and Europe, but also in the security matters. Because if the Europeans can bring security question to the Chinese president, that's exactly the interesting situation, because he is the only one who can claim any kind of leverage over President Putin.
You talked about the strikes that took place on Kiev, all across Ukraine. Now, many, of course, are, many EU leaders, Kaja Kallas also recently called Russia's latest missile strikes a mockery of peace efforts. Piotr, do these statements even matter anymore?
No, it's inflation of statements. It's a inflation of attacks, inflation of statements. The problem is that with the inflated numbers of both, the public loses interest. And this is exactly the positive side for Putin, that the European public, being tired of the war and situation in Ukraine, will turn its back.
So what should Europe do?
Europe cannot turn its back on Ukraine, and this is also a good moment to start to talk publicly about meeting the eye of the words that we have heard over recent months. For example, European Commission proposed that member states spend more on defense, and they can relax their budget deficit procedures for defense spending. Not a single EU member state is asking for that procedure to apply to their budget. Another check. There is such a big rapprochement between EU and Canada. Since January, not a single EU member state ratified an outstanding EU-Canada trade agreement, including Poland, that is sitting at the head of the Council of the European Union and did not ratify the EU-CETA agreement, still is not any step closer to do so. So I'm putting this question out. Are we delivering to our own words that we have heard over the last 3 months?
Piotr, just very briefly, what do you take on Trump's new sort of supposed peace plan where he says Crimea stays with Russia, no NATO for Ukraine, in return the war ends? I mean, can Europe actually accept this kind of proposal?
Europe has to shrug on this, because for Crimea to be given up or not, that is for the Ukrainians to decide. That is for Ukraine. It is about Ukraine. It cannot be that people from outside of Ukraine are deciding on the shape of Ukraine's borders. It has to be up to Ukrainians, and we as Europeans, we have to stand by Ukrainians in that process. It won't be easy, Mr. Trump said in the video you just showed us, but we don't know what will be the end of this conflict at one point in the future. Actually, President Duda's words from yesterday are quite interesting in this perspective. That compromise will take both sides to take a step back. So also Ukrainians will have to take a step back from their demands at some point in the future. So that is a good point to be remembered here. But as I started, we do not have peace negotiations right now.
Very interesting how all this will unfold in the days and weeks to come. Thank you so much, Piotr Kaczyński, EU expert, for being with us here this morning and all your insight.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skye. Thanks for watching, and stay with us for more news and features.